I have a confession.
Yeah, go.
I've been chewing on some Sour Patch Kids on my drive to the gym recently.
Oh,
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. I'm Courtney, and this is my brother Paris, and today we're covering a topic that I think might be one of the number one questions on the internet when it comes to workouts.
it could be definitely a very, very frequently asked question.
So I'm going to start by asking you a variation of that question. Did you work out
Okay.
today?
Today's a rest day for me.
Oh, today's a rest day. Okay, today's a rest day. Did you work out yesterday?
Yes, I did.
And when you worked out yesterday, did you eat before you worked out?
I did.
Okay, so we're going to pick your brain then. Today we're going to be talking about what you should be eating before workouts. How do you effectively fuel a workout? It's an important one, and it can actually make a big difference in terms of your workout performance and quality and how you feel during your workout subjectively. So we're going to break it down. What should you
I like
eat
it.
before your workout?
I like it. This is going to be a good topic. I think we're going to have a lot of clients that come into our ecosystem that I'm going to just shoot this podcast to, because I know we're going to, well, I do get a lot with a lot of new clients. I do get them asking kind of questions like this one. So this will be perfect resource.
Yeah. And just to make sure that everybody watching this knows how to apply it to their own context, what we're going to do is we're really going to break down the nuances about how what you should eat depends on when you might be training or how long before your training session you're actually eating. So you will hear us break down not just what's important with a pre-workout meal, but how that changes depending on the timing of your meal in relation to the timing of your workout.
Definitely. I think the things I think about are like, when are you training, right? And then how close you're eating to your training, and then also your personal preference in terms of what works well for you. And also the other one is what energy state you're in. So are you in a building phase, in a surplus? Are you at maintenance? Are you in a deficit? Are you like, and then the magnitude at which you're at either a surplus or a deficit, I would say.
Because that's going to affect like your baseline fuel, right? Like what your current like regular calorie intake is. When you zoom out, it's not just about what you eat in those moments leading up. It's also about kind of that baseline of how much energy availability do we have?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a great way of saying, energy availability, or like kind of like, what's your energy status? Are you in a well-fed state or underfed or whatever?
Exactly. So all of that context that we just kind of like blew through in 30 seconds, we're going to break it down and we're going to give you some very clear answers so that no matter what time of day you're training, no matter what goal you're tackling, you will have some answers today to the question of what should you eat before your workout. I think with that, we're ready to dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay. So when we're talking about pre-workout fuel, specifically food, I'm not talking about pre-workout supplements. We've talked about that already. Links included below in the description if you do want to talk about pre-workout supplementation. But if you are thinking, hey, nah, I'm good. I'm taking a pre-workout supplement. I don't need to worry about what I'm eating. You got your priorities reversed. I just got to start with that.
Yeah.
Your pre-workout training fuel should first and foremost be nutrition. And we're going to talk about why, because we're going to talk specifically about the role that nutrition and macronutrients play when it comes to supporting your workouts. So Paris, I'd love if you can kick it off and kind of let's go through each of the three macros and how they actually contribute to fueling training.
Yeah. So primarily for training, we know carbohydrates are going to be our gas in the gas tank. Now, typically speaking, like if you're not in a state where you are fat loss dieting, you will have enough just storage, right? Because carbs get stored in our muscle as glycogen. However, a steady supply of carbohydrates into our bloodstream pre-training can be effective in helping us perform better, especially for longer sessions. A pre-workout meal can help in the data, but also obviously like subjectively and anecdotally, it's pretty easy to see if you had a good meal or not before. Like you'll notice a difference for most people, I would say. Fats are slightly less important and they do slow down digestion of food. So a lot of times we don't want to have like a massive hit of or bolus of fats pre-training, because food just ends up sitting in our gut for longer, and all the blood is then diverted to our gut where we want it towards the working muscle. So some people can have some indigestion because of that. Right? Your body is either in training fight or flight mode, or it's in rest and digest mode. And it can't be both at the same time. So one of those is going to take a hit. Typically it's your digestion when you start training too close to eating, or if you're having too many dietary fats and it slows down the digestion.
Right. So
Okay.
the eating too close to training, we're going to talk about that in a second. So let's focus first and foremost on like the role of fats for digestion. Because they slow down digestion, there's something we don't necessarily want to prioritize in a pre-workout meal. Whereas carbs, because they can be digested more quickly, and we'll talk about the differences in different carb sources in a minute, but those are going to be more readily accessible for us to use as fuel.
100%. Yeah, we're not going to be like having a peanut butter and immediately using that as the energy fuel source during our resist training. Like it's not really like that for the type of training that we're talking about.
Right.
And then protein, it just gives us kind of a hit of amino acids in the bloodstream as well. But it's not like you have to have that immediately before training. You know, like
Right.
they'll be floating around there from your pre-workout meal, even if you had like several hours ago.
Yeah.
And yeah,
For those who don't know, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, but they're also the building blocks that help repair muscle. So having them available in your bloodstream can help kind of, let's say start the reparation process ahead of time. So especially if you're somebody who is having maybe your post-workout meal longer after your training, at
yeah,
least having some protein before can be helpful. But if we were to just rank in order of priorities when it comes to the three macros, carbs, number one, right? Because carbs are your body's primary fuel source for your training. Number two priority would be protein, not necessary, but if you are looking to kind of like, have some available amino acids, protein can help. And then third would be fats. So fats would be kind of the lower priority when we're thinking about pre-workout meals.
yeah, definitely. I like how you said also like if you're eating protein right after your workout, like it doesn't really matter if you have it pre-training, but again, if your post-training meal is happening a larger time delay post-training, then and maybe a good idea to have it, some floating around in there, some amino acids.
Yeah.
But I like that. Cool.
Awesome. So that's each kind of role of the macros. So it gives you a sense of essentially what your meal should be constructed of when you're talking about pre-training. Now, it does matter though. There's a million different carb sources I can choose. Maybe not a million. I don't have a million in my pantry, but there's a lot. And there's a lot of different protein sources and fat sources, right? And even if we're trying to steer clear of fat sources, does that mean we never eat fats? Obviously not. We're just talking about pre-training meal. So the impact of how you then go about choosing which food sources and which ratios is going to be first and foremost determined by the timing of your workout in relation to your meal. So just to give you guys some examples, what we're going to do is we're going to break down essentially 3 time windows. Let's say we're having a meal 2, 3, maybe even more hours before training, maybe like an hour before, and then like let's say 30 minutes or less before. So let's now go through each of those and then think about how do we then think about that composition of the meal as it pertains to our macros within each of those time windows before training.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think if we're eating really far away from training, then maybe, having a little bit of fat sprinkled in there might be a good thing because then, we're not going to be hungry and digested everything too much and needing another meal by the time we're hitting our
Right.
workout. But I definitely think that. Go ahead.
I was just going to interrupt you for a second. That's where the slower digestion of fats can actually be helpful because your fats are still energy, they're still calories, right? But if they're already digested because you're eating 3-4 hours before, then all it's doing is like maintaining that energy supply versus again risking hunger or something. Then you're like, oh no, now I need to eat again before I work out.
Exactly. And then obviously you can have like a hit of protein. Maybe the hit of protein is something that does have a little bit more fats in it, for example. And so maybe you choose like, a steak or chicken thigh or salmon or something if it's far away from training. And then your carb source, we can think of more complex carbs or maybe inclusive of fiber, maybe not. Because again, fiber does slow down time of digestion and typically makes us feel more full. So for farther away from training, that's fine because we have time. So maybe things like, sweet potato or other forms of potato, like cooked oats, those things that may have fiber, may not, but are just slower digesting and typically more complex carbs.
The simple way to think about it is if you're eating 2 or 3 hours plus before your workout, you have more time to digest. So you can include a wider range potentially of food sources that are inclusive of fiber and fats, which we know take longer to digest. And also maybe your meal might look a little bigger in terms of portion sizes and stuff because you have more time to digest that food means you're not just like, that all that food's not sitting in your stomach. So when I think about a pre-workout meal that's 2 or 3 hours in advance, I think more about an actual meal. Like I'm sitting down, I'm having a plate of food. So that might actually be like I'm having my full lunch or I'm having my full breakfast or something like that. Versus now, as you'll see as we start talking about, a shorter time window, it might start to bridge more into the snack versus meal kind of territory.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're working out 2-3 hours after your meal, it can be more like a meal.
Yes, exactly, exactly. I like that. I think that kind of sums up the eating kind of far away from
Yeah,
training. What do you
for
think?
sure.
Yeah.
What if we start to move closer to like, okay, it's 1 hour before my workout. I want to feel well fueled. What should the composition of that meal now start to look like?
Yeah, so it can still be similar, but maybe now we're starting to limit the amount of dietary fats for the reasons that we mentioned previously, and maybe that means that the protein source instead of like steak, or maybe we're having like a white fish or protein shake, like protein powder as part of the meal, something that just quicker digesting and maybe
Greek
sits a little
yogurt.
bit easier, or Greek yogurt. Yep. And also you got to think it's not just the necessarily rate of digestion, it's also how it sits with your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
So if you visualize, okay, you know, when I'm choosing a protein source, am I going to make this massive omelet with 5 eggs and like tons of spinach if I'm training in an hour? Probably not.
Yeah, it's a
But
lot of
am
food to
I
be carrying around in your stomach.
exactly? But maybe I'm going to have some whitefish with some rice and like a tiny amount of veggies.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
potentially, depending
Right.
on my personal preferences, right? So that's something to think about. We definitely still need a good hit of carbs, but maybe the carb sources are not potatoes and a big bowl of oats and those kind of things. Maybe it's like, okay, I'm gonna do like cream of rice or rice or bowl of cereal, like
Mm-hmm.
something that's
Toast
just
and jam. I love
toast and
toast and
jam.
jam
Yeah.
or a bagel and light cream cheese.
Something that still does take a little bit of time to digest, but not to the same extent as the ones. And we do maybe want to limit fiber so we don't have things just sitting in our.
Right. So let's now outline the difference between these two. When we're eating 2 or 3 hours or more in advance, we're looking at more of a whole meal. You can account for, maybe more dietary fats. Your carb sources can be more complex carb sources or starchy carbs that have more fiber content. And your protein can potentially be a little bit more variable because it can be inclusive of fats, or it can be a little bit maybe more like voluminous in terms of it sits in your stomach. Now that we're moving towards, okay, I've only got an hour before training, here's the adjustments in a nutshell. Okay. You're going to start reducing your fat intake because it takes longer to digest. We don't want to still be digesting when we're starting to hit our workout. So we're reducing fats and we're also reducing fiber. So that's going to change the carb sources that we choose. Now starting to move away from complex carbs towards more easy digesting carb sources. And your protein sources then might, in relation to that, be things that have less fat content and maybe are just easier on your stomach or to keep in your stomach
Yes.
in a short period of time.
Good. Great summary. Great summary. And again, these are all individual dependent because some people might be like, oh, Paris, I could totally eat potatoes and an hour later, like go train. Whereas somebody else might be like, how do you guys even eat before training? Like I have some clients who can go like hours, like shout out Gabe. He rather eat almost like completely with an empty stomach. If he eats even like 4 hours before training, even
Doesn't
something
feel
small,
good.
he's like still feeling it. So I'm like, you have to listen to your body and take these as guidelines, but you have to put these into practice. That's what I want to say before we continue to the closest time measurement.
That is probably the most important part of all of this. Like these are the guidelines based on like how we digest the different macros, but how you feel when you're digesting the different macros. Don't ever neglect that. Don't ever neglect your personal experience because you got to make sure your training performance feels subjectively great for you.
Yeah,
Cool.
exactly. Just want to slide that in before we go to the 30 minutes or less before.
Yeah. Perfect. And I'm sure we're also going to allude to it once more when we wrap up. Now, okay, let's say I've got 30 minutes or less. So it could even be 15 minutes. How are we now continuing on this trajectory of adjusting our meals closer to the workout when it's a little bit more immediate?
Yeah. So here I'm going to prioritize quick digesting carbohydrate sources. If you are going to include a protein source, it's just going to be like half a scoop of protein or something like that. That's like pretty much like a whey isolate that's just like digested instantly,
Liquid.
almost liquid protein, we'll call it. But for the most part, this is going to be things like, okay, maybe I'm doing honey on rice cakes, or maybe I'm having Rice Krispie Square, or maybe a snacking on some dry cereal, or a banana, or something like that.
Dried fruit is a great one.
Dried fruit, fantastic, or Gatorade powder, even.
I have a confession.
Yeah, go.
I've been chewing on some Sour Patch Kids on my drive to the gym recently. Yeah, the ice pop flavor. It's pretty good. But yeah, that's been my ice pop flavor. Yeah, like those like rocket popsicles that are like red, white, and blue. Those. Anyways.
Wow.
Very good.
I know we're not talking about intra workout, but I've been doing Jolly Ranchers intra workout. So
other quick digesting carb sources. I mean, but if let's say you had 5 minutes and you had a Jolly Rancher, that would also do the job 5 minutes before instead of within your workout.
Exactly. So the closer to the workout, we want to have quicker digesting, typically
Mm-hmm.
just carbohydrate sources.
Right.
People underestimate the like refining your pre-workout meal and refining the timing and refining like all these variables.
Mm-hmm.
They underestimate how much of a difference this can make,
Mm-hmm.
especially in certain contexts that we're
Mm-hmm.
going to.
And I think this is one of the, again, because everything is so context dependent, I do want to say when we're talking about simple digesting carbs, guys, it's honestly sugar. Even if we're talking banana or dried fruit, or like, they are simpler sugars. And this is where there is merit to those food choices because they provide quickly available energy. So Paris started earlier talking about why carbs are our priority macronutrient to fuel workouts. It's the body's number one preferred fuel source for resistance training. And if it's available in the bloodstream, you can use that energy immediately every
Yeah.
rep, right? You can tap into some of that energy. So having those quick digesting carb sources is important part of the repertoire if you're somebody who's looking to elevate your training and you have a short time window before you hit your session.
Yeah, and that's why people are scared of sugar for no reason. Sugar itself doesn't have any health consequences. Just want to put it out there.
Mm-hmm. We'll do a separate episode on that
Yeah,
where we can dive into it in more detail as to why. But
yeah.
this is just a prime example, I think, of like where it can actually be productive.
Yeah, like imagine if you're training in 5 minutes, you have a bowl of potatoes to get your 30
Oh my
grams of
God.
carbs. Like, no, that's not like, come on.
Potatoes are my favorite food, and even I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, you're just not going to do it. It just doesn't make sense. So why would we? So, anyways,
Also, it's not like your pre-workout meal is the only thing you ever eat, right? So it's not like we're saying only eat sugar,
no,
right?
exactly.
We're saying in these moments when you have 15 minutes, sugar can be helpful to make sure you have energy for your workout.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So hopefully that gave you guys a really great picture of like how the timeline leading up to your workout changes the composition of your meal. And, you know, that kind of like 15-minute, 30-minute before we start to get more like just snack territory. It's not really a meal anymore, but pre-workout fueling, right? Now let's start to think about the real life examples. Let's take those timelines and apply them to common times of day when people actually work out. Let's start with morning workouts because I think this one is often questioned, right? And I'm going to preface and say the concept of fasted versus non-fasted training, there's a lot to unpack and a lot of gray zone and a lot of personal subjectivity that can go into that. So we're not going to focus too much on like the validity of fasted versus non-fasted training. We'll save that for a different topic. But what we are going to talk about is how the principles we've just outlined around pre-workout food composition and food choices can be valid within a morning workout.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do find themselves training in the morning, especially, a lot of our parents who have younger kids that are still in school, their me time / gym time is in the morning.
Yeah.
And
Or even
so
people who work, a lot of corporate jobs 9 to 5, and sometimes that 9 to 5 becomes 9 to 7. So making sure, like a lot of those clients also like to get their workouts in the morning because they don't have to worry about, oh, if this meeting goes long or this deliverable doesn't get done in time, it's not compromising on my after work gym session.
Exactly. It's like a sure thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, when it comes to eating before, a lot of times people aren't going to have the luxury of having the 2 to 3 hours before training to digest. So we're kind of removing that off the table. Maybe the 1 hour before potentially, but typically it's just wake up, get your stuff, and go. The key thing I want to highlight that's not even necessarily food is the hydration component that people don't think about. This is probably the biggest influence on how good your session is going to be in the morning is whether or not you actually get enough water. And because think about your body has been not having water for the past, I don't know, maybe at that point, even 10 hours if you stop drinking a couple hours before bed. So key thing is getting in enough water, and I've definitely found that getting electrolytes in does help, especially during morning sessions. Now, there's not a lot of data showing the benefits of electrolytes, but I will tell you anecdotally, and a lot of our clients have reported better sessions, especially since they're important for things like muscle contraction, and your nervous system uses a lot of sodium. So water and salt, I would say, if you're training in the morning, then you can go towards what we just talked about before, like the simple carbohydrate options, like maybe a couple of Rice Krispie squares, maybe half a banana and half a protein shake or something like that, if you want to get a little bit of protein in. But like those are the type of options that you're looking on the way when you're driving to the gym in the morning.
Love that. One of my go-tos, I think, is actually like a short little cup of espresso and a banana. And then I'm on my way out the door. So that's a great option. I think if you're somebody who likes, like, I think about foods that are easily accessible for breakfast, even having like a piece of toast with some jam or a small bowl of cereal, like those things can be really helpful and don't take a lot of time. Because that's the thing too, is like people, the reason why these kind of short, quick digesting carb sources are valid for morning workouts, because usually the reason you're working out in the morning is because it's the only time you got, and it's not like you're waiting around 3 hours between waking up and then going. So
Yeah, exactly. And some people love training fasted too. Like if you feel fantastic, some people feel laser sharp
yeah,
in the morning training fasted, then there's nothing wrong with that as long as you get a good post-workout meal. And that's, again, as we were talking about before, you find what works for you. But if you rather have something in your stomach, use the options that we're talking about. I'd say 50% of people do a little bit better with a little bit in their stomach.
I like that you said that, right? Because we're not saying you must eat before you work out. We're saying if you do, here's
Yeah.
kind of how you can go about it. And there's a difference
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So what about people who work out midday? I'm actually one of them. And I think you are too, actually. Neither one of us
Yes.
works out. Like, I mean, sometimes I do my morning workouts and sometimes it's more after work, but my preference is usually midday. So let's talk about that workout timing.
Yeah, this is an interesting one
Mm-hmm.
because it all matters on if you're a breakfast person or not, and then
Mm-hmm.
when your pre-training meal falls.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you have a really big breakfast, maybe that's your pre-training meal, and then you go towards what we started with talking if you're further away from training. And then maybe if your breakfast is later, then you're going more towards like that 1 hour before type options that we're
Right.
talking about.
Yeah. So, like, for example, let's say you're having breakfast at 9 and your midday is like your lunch break workout, and that's noon. Then you can think about, okay, those meals that we outlined before in our 2 to 3 hour window, that would be appropriate. So maybe it actually is oats, and you might decide to include peanut butter for the satiety and the slower digestion if you love that, right? Versus, let's say you're somebody who has a really late breakfast, or if your midday is actually after lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your lunch now you're going to eat and then go. Now you're starting to be within that 1 hour time period where maybe you're just minimizing fat still, but focusing on carbs and protein.
Exactly. And sometimes I've found this is interesting. I don't know why, but I found some of my best workouts where 3 hours or more before training, I had like a really big meal with a decent amount of fats and a ton of carbs. And then pre-training, I just have like a top up almost.
Like
So it's
just
like,
carbs, like easy
yeah,
carbs. Yeah.
just like Rice Krispie squares or something. I'm not sure why, but I've just found for me. So again, you look at data over time. When do I have my best workouts? These were things that were in my favor, and then you start to find excuse me. Then you start to find a pattern of what works best for your meal timing, and you figure out, and that's an example for me that works. And for
Mm-hmm.
other people to be like, nah, why
Yeah,
would you do that? But anyways, so this is
exactly.
another example. Yeah.
And I think you're right. The midday one is a little bit more trial and error because it depends on how you've timed your meals. If you want, quote unquote, a top up closer to and all of that. And midday can also be quite variable. It could be 12, it could be 3, right? So
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly.
Okay, the last example we want to give is like the after work structure. I think this one is particularly interesting, and there's probably different ways you can bring it to life. I'm thinking about my previous like 9 to 5 job. And when I'd go work out on my way home, I would usually have my lunch. I'm a later lunch person. So if I had my lunch at like, let's say 2 even, by the time I get to the gym, it's like 6, it's 4 hours later. So on those days, I knew it was really important for me to have a substantial lunch that could carry me through and have that more well-rounded meal. But for some people, if they eat lunch at like noon and then now all of a sudden you're working out at 6, that's a lot of time. Chances are you're going to want to have something closer to as that top up or kind of a snack an hour before to try to fuel that workout more specifically, especially because you're tired already at the end of a workday.
Exactly. What I used to do, because yes, everybody, I did used to work a normal job. So it's like, oh yeah, easy for you to say you did this. It's like, no, I've done those days too. Trust me. Entrepreneurship isn't what it cracked out to be. You have all the weekends and everything like that. So
Work is 24/7.
work is pretty much never ending.
Yeah.
So I would say when I used to do it, I used to have I would go home first to change, but right before I change, I would have that kind of like a little bit of carbs, a little bit of protein type meal that I know by the time I finished changing, got ready and was out the door, by the time I get to the gym, it would be digested. So it was kind of in between what we said for like an hour and the 30 minutes. It was interesting, right?
Yeah. It's yeah. I think you kind of got to know your own schedule, and like everyone's commute time to the gym from the office, and if they're stopping at home or not, changes things too, right? I used to go straight from the office, and I take the subway over because it was on my way home, and I was lucky because the office we had at our snack bar we had like those like Welch's fruit snacks or the Sunkist like fruit snacks.
Oh,
I would grab a pack of those out the door and have those. I'm kind of en route to the gym as that quick digesting carb source, right?
perfect.
Yeah.
So again, we're just highlighting how many different options you have. But I will say that something that I don't want to forget, which is why I'm going to say it now, is there have been kind of studies showing that the thing that really impacts performance is not necessarily the exact meal. It's just as long as you're not hungry. So everybody's different with, what meals and how long and et cetera, et cetera. But they did show that performance is impacted when you're hungry during your session. So I think one of the main things that we didn't even talk about is just not making sure that you're not hungry during your session. It seems like obvious, but
goal number one.
Yeah.
I feel like that is the exact reason we're even talking about this to begin with, is like, how do you make sure you're not going in hungry, but you're also not going in undigested?
Yeah, because there's a clear, exactly. You want to find that sweet spot because there is a clear detriment to being hungry. So just don't be hungry, people, going into your workout.
And that's going to be highly individual.
Exactly.
And one of the things that's going to affect that individual's perception of hunger, well, there's many, many things, but one of the things is also going to be what we kicked off with up front, which is what is your current energy state? So the context could be like, are you eating at maintenance? Are you eating in a fat loss phase, in a gaining phase? And I'm going to start off with the argument that if you are in a fat loss phase, structuring your pre-workout nutrition is probably going to be more impactful.
Absolutely.
I would say 9 times out of 10 going to be more impactful than if you are in a gaining phase or a maintenance phase.
I will 100% second that. Here's the way I think about it. The steeper of a deficit you're in, the leaner you are, and the further you are into a fat loss phase, the closer and larger your pre-workout meal has to be, especially carbohydrate driven. That's what I would say.
Because your baseline energy intake is lower. So if you want to still get that peak energy performance from your training, you need to top up a little bit more to close that gap from baseline to performance.
And also, not to mention a workout duration. So if you have a massive leg day, so this is like the combination for a massive meal really close to your training session would be you're very lean, you've been dieting for a long time, you're in a steep calorie deficit, and you have a very long leg day.
So high demand in terms of like compound movements.
And duration.
And duration is longer. So like we're passing that 1 hour in the gym mark.
Yeah. So there you go.
That is when it counts the most. If you are in a gaining phase, of course, there's still benefits. I mean, and especially if we're talking about let's say your overall carb intake is actually higher when you're in a gaining phase, like I am now. My carbs just went up. I actually think I'm eating the highest number of calories and carbs maybe ever right now.
I'm curious. What do you
current target? I just got to bump up to, I'm like 2,300 to 2,450 right now.
Wow.
Calories. Wow. It feels great. But now that I'm playing with a carb target that often starts with a 3 and 2 zeros after it,
jeez,
it's great. I'm telling you, I'm loving life. But because I'm actually in a gaining phase, I have more carbs to work with, which means I can do more of those top ups and I can still cover my bases of, whole food, nutritious, fiber-filled sources with my meals, but I can do those Sour Patch Kids really easily and, get 40 grams of carbs before 5 minutes before my training and feel great off it. So there are nuances, right? Like when you're in the fat loss phase, it does definitely matter more in terms of maintaining your performance in the gym.
100%.
But when you are in a gaining phase and you have a bit of a calorie surplus and therefore a carb surplus to work with, you can direct more proportionally to those sessions.
Yeah, and you're just, again, as I said before, your glycogen stores are more full, and therefore you can get away with less optimal meal timing and still perform well. So again, these nuances matter way more in a fat loss phase, and especially when hunger is something like you don't want to eat 4 hours before, and then you're going to be hungry during your session, and your blood sugar kind of goes zombie mode, right?
Exactly.
So those are the things you have to think about. Also, as you get leaner, you will digest things quicker, and the further you are into a fat loss phase. So you might have had the same meal maybe 2 hours before training in your building phase, and now when you do that same thing in your fat loss phase, you're like, I kind of need another hit of food before I go to the gym. So maybe now you're sliding that up to an hour before. So you have to listen to your body. I will tell you at the end of competition prep, I can eat like 30 minutes before my training session and have like a decent bowl of oatmeal and be like ready and digested.
Your body just slurps it right up.
Soaks it up. Just like instantaneously ready to train after eating. It's insane, right? But now I need to wait like 2 hours at least.
Yeah, because you're like, I'm still digesting my previous meal, let alone this one. Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is, again, we're going to hammer it home. Your individual sensation, and Paris said, listen to your body. And that's a cliche for a reason. But in this case, it is so important and so valuable. You want to be comfortable during your training. Not hungry, not stuffed. You want to be very comfortable. I think about like also the ways we contort our bodies during training. And if you're not digested, like even let's say right now I have like glute hyperextensions and I'm kind of hanging upside down. If I'm undigested,
Oh,
that's recipe for disaster,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, or like even just, think about doing, this is super basic, but like crunches when you're not digested, right? Like you have to make sure that the food in your system is properly digested, but you cannot be hungry either, because that's just not only distracting, but underfueling performance. Okay.
Good stuff.
All right.
I feel good about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I think we covered it. If you have specific questions about your own experience and you want to kind of like talk through how to structure your meals, or maybe, design some go-to meals for you, come reach out to us. We've been trial and erroring it. Is that a thing?
It is now. Yeah.
We've been playing the trial and error game for a long time with this. Yes. And we can help guide you to figure out what subjectively feels great for you. But before we officially sign off for this week, we're going to leave you with this one mindset shift. Intention is impact when it comes to pre-workout fueling and your nutrition pre-workout. If you have the intention of fueling effectively and you make those right choices, you will feel the impact of it. I think I would also be remiss if I didn't say that there are moments in time where I use my pre-workout meal to just get things done. Like 2 weeks ago, I was like, I really don't want to train today, but I pre-committed because I had a bowl of Cheerios and I was like, well, got to put those Cheerios to good use now. Better get moving. Right? So you can also just like use it as part of framing your intention to have a quality session. And even if it creates a bit of placebo effect for you too, of like, I really want to use this fuel that I intentionally designed, this awesome meal, or had this great snack to fuel me, translate that into impact.
Yeah, that's great. And also just like sticking with a baseline routine. Like once you find the perfect formula with the timing, the composition, the amounts for whatever phase you're in, rinse and repeat that, because you'll have very predictable performance. And anytime we can create predictability in our performance is awesome. Like I typically almost always have a good workout. I'm not going to lie. Like for the most part in this phase that I'm in right now, I would say like 90% of the time I have a good workout. And that comes down to rinsing and repeating the same variables with the timing and everything. It's like keeps it consistent, right? So
build your own formula.
Build your formulas.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll leave you
I think
guys.
we're going to wrap up for this week. We hope you found this episode helpful. If you have a go-to pre-workout meal, drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear what it is and what works for you and what formula you've been building. All right, everybody, without further ado, we will leave you for this week and we will be back in your feeds with a brand new episode of Truth Talks next Monday. In the meantime, have a great week ahead. Bye for now.
Take care.